So a lot of this is just how to engage generations, whether they're millennial, not millennial, baby boomer, Gen Z, whatever new name they come up with. It's really just how to bridge the gap between these age groups. So without further ado, let's jump in. First question is, what is a millennial? It's not this. This is something a little bit different. It's Millennium Falcon. It's different. What is a millennium? Well, this is how I've looked at so many different research studies on this, and I've really been trying to pin down where these generations are. And depending on who you talk to, it's different. But the general consensus is that these are the different generations from the boomers, the Gen X, millennials are this range right now, 81 to 96, and Gen Z is anywhere above that. But I've seen articles or research studies that say it's anywhere. So I have a different definition system for what makes a millennial. See, this is baby Jake. I know, super cute. My mom always used to call me Jakers Bakers because she said I had the sweetest little buns. But I guess it's only something a mother can say and get away with. This is baby Jake. I was born right in the middle. I'm like dead center as millennial as you can get. And I think really what defines a millennial is if you're old enough to have owned cassette tapes, but young enough to be able to name a decent amount of Pokemon. But the one thing that really defines the millennial generation, and really even a little bit before that, a little bit after that, is we're a generation defined by technology and information. When I was growing up, I distinctly remember life without a home computer and then a life with one. I remember when the internet was actually created and we were able to use it in school. I remember getting to use Google Maps for the first time in like 8th grade and being like, wow, this is crazy. I could see my house. This is what my house looks like. And one of the things about this fact, growing up in the information technology age, is I think it really did change a lot of how my generation and younger sees goals and objectives. See, growing up in this information age, a lot of millennials and young people grew up believing that the key to success is doing well in school. We grew up with the idea that if you get good grades, you get into a good college. You get a good college, you get a good degree, you get a good degree, you get a good job, and then everything works out then. So all of that comes down to one simple skill. Being able to live your American dream comes down to one single thing, and that's memorization. It's being able to memorize, regurgitate, and repeat. So this is kind of where my mind was at. I was thinking, hey, if I just did really, really well in school, if I tried to memorize everything I could and pass all my tests, then life would be good for me. So by the time I finished high school, I thought I was a real big shot. I thought that since I got great grades and graduated top of my class, I was like, oh yeah, you know, there's nothing that's going to stop me from being a billionaire genius. You know, I'll be the next Elon Musk. No sweat, no worries. And I figured, why not just go into engineering? Because the measure of success is how knowledgeable I was, how much I could prove that I knew everything. So I wanted to go into engineering, and then I figured I would get my engineering undergrad, and then I'd get an MBA, and then, you know, by that time, shoot, I'd probably be ready to start my billion-dollar company and be ready to rule the world. But in college, I met someone who changed my perception, and that someone was the real world. I realized that I was not a billion-dollar genius. I was not an Elon Musk. Wasn't a Steve Jobs. I don't even think I could barely work for them where I was at. I was just a dumb kid who thought that I knew everything just because I got some good grades in high school. And so my whole college experience was doing everything I could to deny this reality. I was doing all the stereotypical millennial things, just distracting myself, doing everything I could to have fun, posting ridiculous things on social media, taking pictures of my food, trying to get as much likes and attention as I could to deny the fact that I was having some issues. And, you know, I was a little bit of a snowflake, to be honest, very sensitive. Wouldn't accept anybody telling me that I had to rethink what I was doing. My dad even once he sat me down. He's like, Jake, I don't think engineering is right for you. Are you sure this is what you want to do? Of course, I, got all indignant. Dad, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm about. You're an old guy. But the truth was, he knew me much better than I knew myself. And I was too sensitive to listen to him. So I fit all of the stereotypes that you hear about millennials and the younger generation. Sensitive, entitled, self-centered, the list goes on. It's ridiculous. You just Google millennial and you find all these, hey, are millennials entitled or are millennials selfish? It's all there. But I fit those stereotypes. But I have a happy ending. It all comes together. I wasn't just a total mess up. But I'm going to pause my story for there, and we'll come back to it. And don't worry, I'll tell you the ending. But before there, let's take this moment to really get into what makes millennials millennials. Let's play a little game here. It's called Who Wants to Be a Millennial? Welcome. I'm going to do my best, worst Regis impression as we play Millennial. And I'm going to ask you questions, and you as the audience, you get to participate. Are we ready to play Millennial? Here's your first question. What percentage of project employees are over 40 years old? A, 70%, B, 50%, C, 40%, or D, 10%? Oh, I see a lot of A's, C, B, lots of C's. Let's see what the answer is. 70%. Yeah, this is crazy. And this was actually a few years ago. This is what I did a lot of my master's and PhD research on, was the talent gap in the project industry. So here what we're having is baby boomers, of course, make up just a big chunk of the population, and especially the project industry and the construction industry. Gen X takes this big dip, and then millennials and post-millennials, they start to pick up a little bit more. But really what we're having, thanks Connor, yeah, the sound effects. Really what we're having here is just this huge talent gap where there's this big expectation of the millennial generation to fill in where the Gen X generation isn't able to fill in all of these vacancies for the boomers. But here's the issue. This is the perception of the millennial workforce. A lot of companies and employers are saying, hey, we don't really think that this generation is cutting it. Saying a lot of these graduates, they have these fancy degrees and they've been going to school for longer. There's millennials more than any other generation are getting master's degrees, graduate degrees, but a lot of employers are saying they don't really have the right skills. This degree isn't really teaching them to be prepared on day one. And what's most interesting is a lot of this younger generation, you can see this 61%, over half of them don't even like the careers that they end up in. So they get into these degree fields, they spend all this time, all this money in school, and they get there and they're not enjoying it. So this is the issue that we have. We have this big talent gap, and we're expecting these millennials to fill it in, but the millennials don't have the right training, nor do they even have the desire. So let's go to our next Millennial question. Which job type do most millennials occupy? A, human resources. B, leadership, management. C, IT support. Or D, marketing and sales. A lot of D's. Are these the right answers? That was bad. I know, it was really bad. What is the answer? Can you believe it? It's true. The percentage of millennials, they gravitate towards leadership and management. In fact, they crave it. So these are just general surveys, and these are all different surveys and different trends that I took. Oh, and by the way, at the end of the presentation, if you want these slides or if you want any of my sources, happy to share. So look at this. Over 90% of millennials want to be leaders, and half of them actually hold leadership positions. And almost half of them really want to stay with the company in the long term. There's the stereotype that millennials don't want to keep with one job, that they want to go and they want something different and this and that. But it's their job hopping is really no different than the generation before them.
Right.
And here's the reason, and this is just, there's no science behind this, but this is the observations of Jake, from what I've seen from my students, from myself, from my contemporaries. The other part of growing up in this age, in this generation, is I like to call the millennial generation the fantasy generation. For the first, not the first time, but more than ever before, 80s and beyond, these kids grew up with more movies, more TV, more video games, even more books. There's a reason why Harry Potter was such a huge success in the time that it was. It was more successful than any other fantasy book ever with its generation. The reason why that is because there's something about millennials that crave this why, this desire to be the hero, to go on a quest, to accomplish something bigger than themselves. I think what it is we're more integrated as a global integration more than ever before. So growing up, we see a lot more of what's happening around the world. Not just what's happening in our immediate circle, not just, hey, what are the skills that I need? Like, what are the tangible hard skills? But we grew up saying, oh, there's issues with the environment. There's issues with politics. There's issues in the Middle East. There's issues in Washington, Africa, all around the world. And so a lot of this age group, millennials and youngers, they want to do something that makes a difference. And they want to be a part of something that they really feel like is adding value. Now, it's what's funny is a lot of people look at this and they say, well, that's a little too idealistic. Not everybody can do something that makes a difference. But I actually think that's how most young people are, not just millennials. I think most young people really want to do something that makes a difference. We got a comment from Margot here. My experience is that millennials are not in their jobs long and their goal is to move up to management. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's when millennials get in, it's, hey, okay, what's my path to management? How quickly can I get a promotion? What? Is it going to take more than a year? Are you kidding me? I'm going to be running this place. Yeah, it's totally true. Most millennials want to be in that position. So now let's move this question to a little bit beyond just millennials. And let's do our final question of who wants to be a millennial heir? Who said this famous quote? The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in the place of exercise. So who said it? A, Oprah Winfrey. B, Socrates. C, Ronald Reagan. Or D, Albert Einstein. Socrates. Yep. Okay, I'll do you one better. If this quote is kind of interesting that he said it, take a look at these quotes. I'm not going to read them out. I'm just going to give you a second. Look at these quotes and look at the dates of when they were said. I could take any one of these quotes and put it in an article about millennials, right? We've heard these same things about this generation. Reckless, disrespectful, think of themselves, impatient. This is not a millennial issue. This is a human issue. Look at this. This is another quote from Socrates. Basically what he's talking about is he's saying millennials are too obsessed with paper. Said they're writing everything. And because they're writing everything, they're going to be forgetful. They're too dependent on it. They're not memorizing. This is actually the same argument we see with technology and smartphones. It's always the same. The older generation looks at the younger generation and they're like, hey, whatever you're doing, that's not what we did, so it's going to ruin you. This is one of my favorite pictures. All this technology is making us antisocial. Is every young generation, or every generation has these new technologies, has these new things. But really, if we come back to it, what's wrong with millennials? I would say it's nothing. Say nothing new. It's the same old story, just like Michelle said, just a different generation. It's like millennials are a funky looking reboot of an old movie. Shiny new toys, new technology, but it's still the same at the heart. And millennials, we try to put all these different characteristics on them. Oh, they're this way, or they're this way. But just like any generation, they come in so many different shapes and sizes and styles. Some of them are, they've got their interesting, unique styles. Some of them are very successful, maybe a little bit robotic, but successful. And some of them are a little extra weird. You got the Jakes from State Farm. So the real question that we come down to is I bring us through Who Wants to Be a Millennial There just to show that it's not a one generation problem. It's really, the question isn't what's wrong with millennials or really how do we engage this one generation, but it's just how do we bridge the gap? How do we bridge the gap between generations? Whether it's boomers to millennials, X to Z, millennials to Z, what do we do to connect it? And that's what part 2 of my presentation is going to explore.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel for more content. If you have any questions about the best value approach or for Dr. Dean, leave them in the comment section below and we'll get to them in a later video. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.